Today, we're going to be exploring another alternative operating system, this time for the Mac and the Amiga, called MorphOS. And this turns an old PowerPC Macintosh into the Amiga of your dreams. And I have covered MorphOS on this channel in the past, but I think my last dedicated video was about 5 years ago. And after I did a brief demo in my recent PowerMac G5 video, I did get quite a few requests in the comments for a more in-depth video on MorphOS. And as it turns out, there has been a new release of it this summer. So today, we're going to be looking at the newest version of MorphOS, version 3.17, that was released in May of this year. And I even saw some people on the MorphZone forum who claim to use MorphOS as their daily driver OS and even run their businesses using it. So I thought we'd put the latest version to the test. And whenever we talk about MorphOS, we need to quickly look at the history of this operating system because it is interesting and quite unique, as this OS started life back in the 90s, as back then Commodore, the company that manufactured the Amiga computer platform, had just gone bankrupt, and at the time it felt like there was no future or direction for the machine. But some third-party companies wanted to keep the Amiga alive, and they released high-end accelerator cards for the Amiga, which could upgrade the CPU to the then new PowerPC architecture. But of course, it also needed an operating system to take advantage of that, and that's what MorphOS originally was. It was made to be a next-generation Amiga operating system to take that platform into the 21st century. And after a while, the PowerPC accelerated Amigas started to get a bit anemic and fade away. MorphOS needed a new platform. In the early 2000s, there was some custom boards that were made to run MorphOS, but then they targeted PowerPC Macs, which of course were the most readily available and affordable machines. And that brings us up to today. So that's the history lesson out the way, and just to reaffirm that, this does only run on Macs with a PowerPC CPU. You're not going to be running it on your M1 or even your Intel Mac, and these were discontinued back in 2006. So we're talking very old hardware in computer terms. But MorphOS serves two purposes really. The first one is to rejuvenate and support these old Mac machines with an operating system and software that's still in active development today, and to give Amiga fans a high-end Amiga-like experience on much cheaper hardware, as buying an old Amiga 1200 with a PowerPC accelerator will probably set you back around £2,000 on eBay today, whereas you can get a Mac Mini G4 either free or at most about, £20 I think you can get them for now. And that brings us onto my hardware, and I actually run MorphOS on two separate machines. And the first one is a Mac Mini G4 that I've got connected to a CRT monitor, and I kind of use this one for that PowerPC Amiga-like experience, running some of the old PPC demos from the 90s that look really good on here. And I've also got it on a PowerMac G5 hooked up to a modern widescreen LCD display. And there is a full list of which Mac models MorphOS supports on the website, or if you don't want to get used hardware, if you want to buy a new machine, MorphOS also supports new PowerPC machines like the mighty X5000, although this will set you back over €2,000. You know, these small run custom machines like this, they're not cheap to make. And installing MorphOS is easy. You go to their official website, you download the ISO image, and as we're talking about hardware from the mid-2000s, they of course all have optical drives in them, so easiest way is to burn it to a blank CD-ROM and boot your Mac from it. And the installer is really straightforward. You can install a fresh full copy, or if you've got an older version, you can do an update. And you can check out a basic install of the operating system from the live CD as well. And this would be a good time to mention the cost. Now, MorphOS is a niche operating system made for a very niche audience, and it's not free. You can try it out for 30 minutes for free, but if you want to run it regularly, you'll need to purchase a license. And for most machines, this will cost €79. And it's bound to the machine that you install it on, so that means you can't transfer it onto a new machine. Unless your old one dies, and then you can contact the MorphOS team, and they will give you a new key file after disabling the old one. And the stock install of MorphOS looks very clean and streamlined, but I've got to admit, a little bit boring. That is not how I run things. So the first thing I do when I install MorphOS is to download a brilliant third-party package called the Chrysalis Pack. Now this is an almost 1 GB image that contains heaps of third-party software packages, configs, emulation, all of that pre-installed, and after downloading and installing that, you will have something that looks a bit more like this. Now this is my current MorphOS 3.17 install on my Power Mac G5. Now this is a 2 GHz machine with 1 GB of RAM, and as you can see up on the top there, we've got 90% of the RAM free on boot. MorphOS, keeping that Amiga legacy, is very tight and efficient and has a very small footprint. And the desktop manager of MorphOS is called Ambient. So here we can see the Ambient desktop with my disk icons in the top right. And I've got 3 partitions on here, and we get a RAM disk set up by default as well. Now, a RAM disk is used for temporary storage, which is then wiped when the machine is rebooted. Really handy for downloading things like installers, where you don't need to keep the files around after you've installed the software. And this was always a standard feature in Amiga OS, and to be honest, I'm surprised that more operating systems haven't implemented a RAM disk as standard over the years. It's a very handy feature, probably even more so today. And if you double click on the desktop, that will open the File Explorer, which again shows all of the system disks and the system assigns. They're kind of like shortcuts which allow you to access directories and devices without knowing the full path. And I've got a dock, which is called a panel in MorphOS, at the bottom of the screen with a bunch of my most used programs in there. I'm sure you know what a dock is. And at the top of the screen, we've got the title bar. Now this is customizable with modules. Now I've got a bunch of these enabled already, and people can make their own. You can download and add or remove them really easily. And these are actually really handy just to keep an eye on things like system performance and network activity. And there are even things like media players that can run up here as well. And right-clicking on the mouse brings up the system menus, and from here you can access them in the traditional Amiga way by going to the top of the screen, or you can right-click anywhere and the menu will appear underneath your mouse. And the user interface of MorphOS relies heavily on something called Magic User Interface, or MUI, which started life back in 1993 on the Amiga as a more powerful replacement to the Amiga's standard UI. And it's very modular, and in MorphOS we've got a fully registered version 5, which is backwards compatible with the old Amiga version. And using Ambient is very logical as well. If I double click on my system disk, you can see that it opens and we see all the directories in here, or drawers as they're known in Amiga-like operating systems. And Ambient has got some really nice navigational features. Now by default, it hides some of the system files and directories unless they've got an icon or an info file as they're known. But we can see hidden files in any disk or directory simply by selecting all files, and then they appear. And we can toggle between icon view and list view. And you can navigate back through parent directories easily from here. And there are some navigation icons and shortcuts to frequently use things like creating new directories and showing info. And these are all customizable and changeable too. On the edge of Windows, we've got gadgets. Now, one of these is a depth gadget, so you can bring a window to the front or back with it. You can, of course, do this by double-clicking, which is the more modern way of doing things. But the depth gadget is a legacy Amiga thing, and actually sometimes it is quite handy to do something in a window without having to bring it to the front over everything else. And I've always loved the system directory structure from the Amiga. Very clean, very easy to navigate, and MorphOS retains that as well. With system commands in the C directory, we've got libraries in libs, device drivers in devs, all the same as the Amiga. And this system has actually aged really well, and finding and adding things is very easy in MorphOS. One difference over Amiga OS that MorphOS has is that it keeps all of the critical system files away from the user and away from these usual directories. They're actually kept in a hidden drawer called MOS sys, and these are the files that you should never delete or change. Just leave the system to manage these. So I actually think it's a really good idea that they're kept separate from the rest of the system, and that means things are less likely to break. And of course we have system preferences, and in MorphOS they're actually quite macOS-like, all kept together in one place, and from here, of course, you can change all the normal things, your screen resolution, printers, mouse sound options, all of that you'll find in the Preferences pane. So what's new in MorphOS 3.17, and what can we actually do with this? Can it really be used as a daily driver in 2022? Well, we're going to deep dive into all of that next. And this video is brought to you with my sponsor, my incredible friends at Readly. Now, I love technology magazines. In fact, I've read them ever since I was a kid. So I was really excited to discover this amazing service that lets you read the best magazines in the most convenient way, straight to your phone, your tablet, or even your desktop PC. And Readly is like the Netflix of magazines, and you get unlimited access to over 5,000 magazines, and you can read as many as you like for one set monthly price. And you even get the back issues as well, so you never run out of things to read about your favourite subjects. And with bookmarking and offline reading, that means you can read them even when you haven't got signal, on the plane, on the way to a holiday. Never miss a magazine again, and there are titles on everything you could imagine: fashion, lifestyle, education, health, tech, and lots more as well. There is something for everyone on here. And they've got magazines I know you'll love if you're a fan of my channel. Retro Gamer is a must-read every month, and it's fantastic to be able to read it anywhere you go. And they've even got the new versions of Crash, Zap 64, and Zap Amiga are on here as well. And if you're into current-gen gaming and technology, they've got magazines like Official Xbox, which give you the best game reviews each month. So you need to try this out for yourself and unlock all of these incredible magazines. And I've got you an amazing offer, so don't miss out on this. Click the link in this video's description and you will get 2 months free of Readly, which can be cancelled at any time. So check out the link, and a big thank you to my friends at Readly for their support of my channel. Okay, then time to see exactly what we can do using MorphOS in 2022. Now, we are running the latest release, MorphOS 3.17, and this version is really a bug fix and optimization release, which, while very important, is obviously not the most exciting thing to show on a video, but there have been some big new features introduced in MorphOS so far in 2022, and a couple of these actually made their debut in the earlier 3.16 release that came out in March this year. And the big one is there is a new web browser bundled with the operating system. Now, this is a new WebKit-based browser called Wayfarer, and this supports most modern websites, and it has stuff like password encryption, supporting media playback, a built-in ad blocker, and I've got to say, from my first impressions of this, it works really well. Now, of course, it's not going to be as fast as using Safari on my M1 Mac, of course. I mean, this is an almost 20-year-old computer I'm using here, so keeping that in mind, the performance of Wayfarer on modern websites is very impressive. Now, I can visit all of my usual forums and MorphOS download sites. Of course, you'd expect all of them to work. They're pretty light websites. But what about something heavy that we rely on today? Well, yeah, this even works with Google Docs. Kind of. Now, the disclaimer here is that it opens, but it is extremely slow if you want to write anything. Honestly, there's about a 5-second gap between typing something on my keyboard and the change appearing on the screen. But if you were sent a Google Docs link, you can read them just fine. So I'm not going to play down just what a big step this is for an Amiga-like operating system and an Amiga-like browser. But let's give it the big test. Can it play YouTube? Now, this is always something that is a big challenge for alternative operating systems. You might have seen me try it on Haiku and RISC-OS. A lot of them struggle with it, but the answer here is, well, yes, it can. And actually, quite impressively, even though getting going with a video and loading the page is pretty slow, but once it's running, we can watch YouTube up to 720p pretty reliably. Now, we do get a few slowdowns here and there in the window, but it is running and the CPU is admittedly hitting almost 100%. But again, we're watching YouTube in a browser on a Mac from 2003. So honestly, this is seriously impressive. So I think web browsing in MorphOS using Wayfarer is probably about as good as you're going to get for both an old Mac and an Amiga-like operating system. The other big new addition in MorphOS 3.17 is a modern email client. Now, the Amiga has been blessed with decent email applications in the past, stuff like Yam and Simple Mail, but this new MorphOS native program, Iris, makes it seriously simple. Now, launching it, the first thing you're asked to do is select from some of the most common email services, and all you have to do is sign in, and it automatically sets everything up. Or of course you can enter your own IMAP or POP3 information, but this is really usable. It supports stuff you'd expect today like HTML emails. It's even got scheduled email sending, everything you'd expect from a modern email client. And seriously, I've got to say, email's not the most exciting thing, but this is a pleasure to use. I actually wish that Iris was available on macOS and Windows, to be honest. I like it that much. And incredibly, there are still a few high-profile commercial applications that are developed for MorphOS today, including Pagestream. Now, there was a brand new version of this released just 2 weeks ago, and this was a famous Amiga desktop publishing program back in the 90s, and today it's still developed for Windows, Mac, Linux, and MorphOS. So the latest version, 5.1.2, was released earlier this month, and there is a free demo that you can download to try, or if you like it, you can buy it for $99. Now, admittedly, I'm not really in the market for a desktop publishing program, but I do know that the new Amiga Addict magazine is made on Pagestream using an Amiga. So if they can make a full magazine using that in 2022, this is obviously a very capable program. And this new version has been getting some really good reviews on the forums over the last couple of weeks. So it's really nice to see that commercial applications are still being made for MorphOS. And while we're talking about the Amiga, what's Amiga compatibility like? Well, MorphOS does run Amiga applications and seamlessly out of the box. Now, if I insert a USB stick with a backup of my Amiga 4000's hard disk on here, you'll see that it recognizes it straight away. It shows all the Amiga icons. That all works by default. And I can just load up some files from the old Amiga workbench on here. Now, these are, system-friendly ones from the 90s, old Commodore programs. They launched just fine on here. And by system-friendly, I'm talking about programs that don't bang the metal of the Amiga or look for the Amiga's custom chipset. But even the big old Amiga programs, some, big productivity suites from back then, work without any extra setup. Wordworth 7 was my word processor of choice on my Amiga 1200 back when I was a teenager. And today, it still runs flawlessly on MorphOS. And if anything, I'd say it's even more usable on here, as today I get to run it in 24-bit color on this nice big high-resolution screen. And if you do want to run Amiga games and demos, you can run them using EUAE, a full Amiga emulator that doesn't come as standard with MorphOS, but you can download it, or it is already set up if you get the Chrysalis Pack. And from here, it's actually integrated really nicely with Ambient. You can launch Amiga disk images, ADF files from the menu. Now, this messes up my capture card, but I'll show you on this other machine here. You can see that this works really well. And you can get more advanced and set up a full Amiga hard disk install, and even use things like WHD load to make it even easier to turn this into a full Amiga emulation experience. But keeping that Amiga legacy, there are things like tracker programs and scene demos available for MorphOS, and actually there is a native MorphOS PowerPC demo and game scene, and there is a big collection of them you can download and try out on your machine. So that's been a look at the latest release of MorphOS version 3.17, another brilliant release, and I've got to say, my favourite Amiga-like OS, and it is incredible the development continues on this operating system. But to answer the question I posed at the start of this video, could you use this as a daily driver OS? Well, like I said, people actually do. And obviously, that's going to depend on your personal needs. But I think the answer to that question would be yes, but with a big caveat. Now, obviously, it is held back by the hardware. The fact that MorphOS runs this well on 20-year-old hardware is testament to how well it's coded and how efficient it is. But if this ran on something more modern like a Raspberry Pi, for example, I'm sure this would be lightning fast. Most of the things that are slow is down to the old Mac hardware. Now, admittedly, I've never tried out MorphOS on a modern high-end machine like the X5000, but at over €2,000, I imagine that's probably out of the reach of most users. But I do know that in the future, the MorphOS team are planning on leaving the PowerPC legacy behind and actually moving to ARM64 architecture. And they were showing an early demo of this at Amiga Germany, a big show that happened back in 2019. And that show is actually on again next month. So it will be interesting to see how that new version of MorphOS is shaping up now, as on the right hardware, this could really fly. So thank you very much for watching this video. Just a quick heads up, if you enjoy my content here on YouTube, I've got a feeling you'll enjoy my podcast as well. The Retro Hour, new episodes released every Friday. We bring you up to speed on all the big goings on in the world of retro gaming and tech, and we speak to a veteran of the industry for an interview on each week's show. And the latest one is actually about 3D construction kit. So you can get that right now on your favorite podcast app. Ask your smart speaker to play the Retro Hour podcast, or head to our website at theretrohour.com. And while you're here on YouTube, here are a couple more of my videos I think you might enjoy. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.